Black CEO denied first-class seat. 12 minutes later, he grounds the plane and fires the pilot. The intercom buzzed, "Captain Morrison, we need you up front immediately." The cabin went silent. In seat 2A sat Marcus Williams, a black CEO in a crisp suit, just accused of faking his first-class ticket. He didn't argue. 12 minutes later, the jet stopped, and what he did next stunned everyone. Every head lifted. Passengers looked up from their phones, magazines, and half-finished coffees. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter for a moment. Something was wrong, very wrong. All eyes drifted toward the front of the plane, to seat 2A. There sat Marcus Williams, a tall black man in his early 40s, dressed in a crisp, tailored suit. He hadn't moved for 12 long minutes, not when the flight attendant raised her voice, not when other passengers started whispering, and not even when cameras started recording. "Sir," said Jessica, the lead flight attendant, her voice sharp, "this is your last chance. Show me your real ticket. We both know you don't belong here." Marcus looked up slowly, his face calm, his posture steady. Without a word, he handed over his boarding pass once more. Jessica snatched it, scanned it, and frowned. The ticket was real, first class, seat 2A, purchased under his name. Still, she shook her head. "This must be a mistake," she insisted, her voice now carrying over the cabin. "First class is for priority passengers only," the words stung. Whispers spread across the rows. A few passengers smirked, nudging each other. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the unfolding scene. But nobody said a word to defend him. Nobody challenged the assumption that Marcus didn't belong. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice or demand respect. Instead, he glanced at the gleaming Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, then back to the screen of his phone. A new message had come through. "Everything ready, sir. Just give the word." It was from his legal team. Jessica crossed her arms, frustration mounting. "Sir, you're holding up the entire flight. People have connections, schedules, families. If you don't leave this seat, I'll have no choice but to call security. You're delaying everyone." A murmur of agreement rippled through the cabin. For many passengers, Marcus was no longer just a stranger in seat 2A. He was now the reason their flight hadn't taken off. To them, he was an inconvenience, maybe even a troublemaker, but Marcus wasn't moved. He stayed seated, calm, silent. His stillness unsettled Jessica, who was used to passengers arguing, pleading, or breaking down. His composure was unnerving. Finally, with her patience running out, Jessica grabbed the intercom and announced, "Captain Morrison, we need you up front now." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the nervousness beneath her authority. The passengers leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. The pilot himself was coming. Surely this would end with Marcus being escorted off the plane. That's what everyone expected, but Marcus knew something they didn't. Power wasn't always about who raised their voice the loudest. Sometimes it was about who could wait in silence, because in exactly 12 minutes, the same man they tried to humiliate would bring this entire flight to a standstill, and the captain himself would never forget it. The cockpit door clicked open, and Captain Morrison emerged. His presence filled the cabin instantly. Tall, broad-shouldered, his Navy uniform pressed to perfection, he was the kind of man who carried himself like the sky belonged to him. He walked down the aisle with a steady stride. The eyes of 147 passengers locked on him. This was the moment. Everyone expected him to settle the matter quickly, to put Marcus back in his place so the plane could finally take off. "Sir," the captain said firmly as he stopped in front of seat 2A, "I've been told you're refusing to comply with crew instructions." Marcus raised his eyes slowly, calm and steady. "I've complied with every instruction," he said softly. "My ticket says seat 2A. Would you like to see it yourself?" The captain held out his hand. Marcus passed the ticket over without hesitation. Morrison scanned it, his brows furrowing. First class, paid in full. Correct boarding pass. His eyes flicked back to Marcus. For a brief moment, Morrison hesitated. He knew the ticket was legitimate. But when he glanced at Jessica, red-faced, arms crossed, he made a choice. "Sir, I'll ask you one more time to move to economy. We can sort this out after the flight. Right now, you're delaying everyone." Gasps spread through the cabin. A man leaned across the aisle and whispered loudly, "Knew he didn't belong here. Another chuckled, shaking his head as if justice had been served. Marcus felt their stares burn into him. The sting wasn't new. He had felt it in boardrooms, on golf courses, even at restaurants where the waiter assumed he couldn't afford the meal. But what cut deepest wasn't the disbelief of strangers. It was the silence of those who knew better and chose to say nothing. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply leaned back in his seat and checked his phone again. Another message from his legal team flashed on the screen. "Sir, your decision will ground the aircraft." "Confirm?" He typed back just one word. "Proceed." The cabin hummed with tension. Jessica smirked, believing victory was within reach. The captain straightened, ready to call security. But before he could move, an announcement chimed overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a new voice through the intercom, calm but commanding. "This is the airline's corporate office. Due to a matter of compliance, this flight will remain grounded until further notice." Murmurs erupted instantly. Passengers turned to one another, confused. Jessica froze, her face draining of color. Captain Morrison stiffened, uncertain. Marcus slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket and folded his hands neatly in his lap. For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. Nobody knew yet that Marcus Williams wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO of a global firm that partnered with the very airline they were flying on. The same airline whose staff had just accused him of being a fraud. The silence in seat 2A was no longer the silence of a powerless man. It was the silence of authority, waiting for the storm to break, and for the crew, the storm was only just beginning. The cabin buzzed with restless energy. Parents hushed their children, businessmen muttered about missed meetings, and a college student in row 18 filmed every second on her phone. Everyone wanted answers. Why had the flight suddenly been grounded? Captain Morrison pressed the intercom button. "Control, this is Flight 278. We need clarification on that last message." Static crackled, then came the reply. "Stand by, Captain. Compliance officers are en route to the gate. No aircraft movement until further notice." Jessica's confidence evaporated. She leaned in close to the captain, her voice sharp but shaky. "What's going on? We can't just sit here. The passengers will riot." The captain's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to losing control. He turned back to Marcus. "What exactly did you do?" Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, his composure unshaken. "I didn't do anything. I simply reminded your company who I am," Jessica scoffed. "Who are you?" "You're just—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. But the passengers had already heard the venom in her voice. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "My name is Marcus Williams. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Williams Global Holdings. We're one of your airline's top corporate partners. My company invests millions annually to keep your fleet in the sky. And yet, here I am, treated like a criminal for daring to sit in a seat I paid for." A stunned silence swept through the cabin. Phones tilted higher, recording every word. A man in business class muttered, "No way," while another passenger whispered, "Did he just say CEO?" Jessica's face turned pale. "That doesn't prove anything," she stammered. "Anyone can say they're important." Marcus's phone buzzed again. Without breaking eye contact, he opened the message. It was from the airline's board liaison. "Our apologies, Mr. Williams. Immediate disciplinary review for staff involved. The captain will receive instructions shortly." He turned the screen toward Jessica. She blinked at the words, her lips parting in disbelief. The captain read it too, his face tightening. "You," Morrison said slowly, realization dawning. "You really are who you say you are?" Marcus tilted his head. "And yet, that didn't stop you from assuming otherwise." The captain's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he had no script, no authority to lean on. The uniform that once commanded respect felt like a costume he couldn't hide behind. Whispers grew louder. Passengers shifted from silent observers to vocal critics. Unbelievable. This is discrimination, plain and simple. "I can't believe they treated him like that." Jessica's eyes darted around, panic rising as she realized the tide was turning against her. The videos being recorded weren't just capturing Marcus's calm, they were capturing her humiliation, her prejudice, her downfall. Marcus folded his hands again, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You wanted to make an example out of me. But in the next few minutes, You'll learn what happens when people in power misuse it." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. For Jessica and Captain Morrison, the real turbulence wasn't outside the plane. It was right there in the cabin, and it had only just begun. The cabin grew heavier with tension. Every eye was fixed on Marcus Williams. Passengers leaned forward, phones raised, capturing every moment. Even the flight attendants, who had once held authority over the cabin, now looked like intruders in someone else's story. Captain Morrison ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. "Sir, Marcus," he began cautiously, "you realize this situation is unprecedented. We have procedures, protocols." Marcus smiled faintly, not mockingly, but with a quiet certainty that froze Morrison mid-sentence. "Procedures? Protocols? Those were never meant to protect me. They were meant to protect you from questioning your assumptions." Jessica's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to speak so clearly, so boldly. For years she had prided herself on her judgment, on knowing who belonged where. And now she realized she had been blind. Marcus reached into his briefcase, carefully pulling out a sleek, embossed leather folder. The cabin leaned in collectively, the suspense palpable. He placed it on the tray table in front of him and opened it slowly, revealing documents, emails, and photos. Each page told a story of bias, of assumptions turned into action. "These aren't just my experiences," Marcus said. "These are yours too, Jessica. Every time a black passenger, a person of color, or anyone who looks different from what you expect, tries to sit where they belong, you act first, question later. And the consequences? Devastating. For them, for you, for the company you represent." Jessica felt her knees weaken. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. I didn't know." Marcus's gaze softened slightly. "That's exactly it. You didn't know. And that's why education, awareness, and accountability matter more than fear of conflict." Morrison cleared his throat, stepping closer. "Sir, the compliance officers are still on their way. They're expecting a disruptive passenger." Marcus leaned back, folding his hands over his chest. "Let them come. They'll see a passenger sitting quietly in his assigned seat. They'll see the evidence of bias before they see me as a problem. And they'll learn the truth." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, realizing they were witnessing a rare and powerful moment. An ordinary man standing up against systemic injustice with poise, intelligence, and authority. "Emma," the student recording whispered to herself, This is historic." Her live stream views climbed rapidly, and within minutes, thousands more were watching the unfolding drama. Marcus turned to the cabin, his voice firm but calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see here is more than a personal confrontation. It's a lesson on assumptions, on bias, and on how easily authority can be misused. And it's a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly, waiting for the right moment to act." Captain Morrison exhaled slowly, the weight of Marcus's words pressing down on him. For the first time, he felt truly powerless, not because of the passengers or the cameras, but because the truth had arrived, undeniable and unshakable. And as the first sounds of the compliance officers boarding echoed from the cabin door, Marcus's calm composure remained unbroken. He wasn't just defending a seat. He was defending dignity, justice, and the principle that no one should ever be judged by the color of their skin or the assumptions of others. The cabin door swung open, and two airport security officers stepped in, Jane Kim and Mike Rodriguez, each carrying restraints. Their confident strides faltered the moment they took in the scene. Marcus Williams sat calmly in seat 2A, briefcase at his side, eyes observing every move. The passengers held their breath, phones raised, recording history in real time. "Sir," Kim began, her voice steady but cautious, "we need you to come with us voluntarily." Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm in my assigned seat with a valid boarding pass," he said quietly. "I have no intention of moving until this aircraft reaches Phoenix." Rodriguez shifted uneasily. "You're interfering with aircraft operations. This is a federal offense." "Last warning," the cabin tensed. Even Captain Morrison, with decades of experience, felt his control slipping. He glanced at Jessica, who trembled beside him, realizing for the first time that the man she had tried to remove might hold more power than she ever imagined. Marcus opened his briefcase deliberately, retrieving a sleek folder. "Before you proceed, do you understand the legal ramifications of unlawful detention?" His voice was calm, precise, professional even. Kim hesitated. What do you mean?" Marcus lifted a document, sliding it toward her. "These documents outline federal regulations, rights of passengers, and corporate accountability. If you act without understanding these, the consequences won't be mine. They will be yours." Emma's live stream exploded as the cabin buzzed. Viewers shot past 80,000, watching every second of this tense standoff. Comments poured in, "This is insane. Justice is coming. Someone finally holding them accountable." Captain Morrison's voice shook. "Marcus, we didn't know." "Exactly," Marcus said softly. "You didn't know. You acted on assumption, bias, and fear. Now you're facing the result." Rodriguez glanced at Kim, uncertainty in his eyes. Neither of them had anticipated this. They had expected a defiant passenger, not a meticulously prepared corporate board member, armed with legal expertise and a plan. Marcus turned to the cabin. "What you are witnessing isn't just about me. It's about how assumptions become action, how bias becomes policy, and how silence allows injustice to continue. Record this. Share this. Learn from this." The officers exchanged glances and stepped back, lowering their hands from the restraints. Morrison swallowed hard. He realized the truth. Marcus controlled this situation, not through anger, but through authority, strategy, and the undeniable power of evidence. Jessica sank into her seat, the weight of her error crushing her. Marcus's gaze softened just slightly. "I don't hold anger here," he said, "but I do demand accountability. You'll have your chance to learn, and you'll either take it or you'll face the consequences." At that moment, Morrison's radio crackled. Corporate headquarters was watching. Every move was under scrutiny. Orders came through, no further action against Marcus. The board would handle the situation. Marcus leaned back, checking his watch, calm as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the cabin knew differently. Cameras, phones, and live streams had captured an unforgettable lesson. Courage, dignity, and preparation can confront and overturn a system built on assumption and bias. The flight was still airborne, but the story had already taken off, destined to reach thousands, to inspire, to teach, and to demand change. And Marcus Williams, sitting silently in first class, had become more than a passenger. He had become a symbol. The flight continued toward Phoenix, but the tension in the cabin had shifted. No one spoke above a whisper. Every passenger, from the toddler clinging to a parent to the businessman in 1C, was aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Marcus Williams, still seated in 2A, exuded calm authority. He closed his briefcase and surveyed the room, letting the silence speak louder than words. Captain Morrison slumped in his seat, still shaken. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like gravity. For years, he had followed protocol, assumed the worst about passengers who didn't belong, never questioning the bias that guided his decisions. Today, that complacency had been shattered, publicly, with evidence he could not ignore. Jessica Martinez, her face pale and tear-streaked, finally found her voice. I misjudged you," she whispered. "I treated you as if you weren't supposed to be here." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes steady. "It's not just about me. It's about every passenger, every employee, every person who has ever been misjudged because of assumptions they couldn't control. Today, you have a choice: learn or repeat the mistake." Emma's live stream had reached over 150,000 viewers. The comments flooded in with messages of support, outrage, and hope. People were inspired, enraged, and motivated to act. One viewer typed, "I'm never staying silent again. This changes everything." As the plane began its descent, Marcus reached for his phone. A call came through from corporate headquarters. The Southwest Airlines board confirmed that Marcus's documentation and actions had prompted an immediate overhaul of company policies. Mandatory anti-discrimination training, auditing of all crew decisions, and the implementation of a zero-tolerance bias policy were now in effect. Marcus turned to the cabin once more. What happened here today is more than a personal victory. It's a test, a demonstration of how courage, preparation, and truth can confront systemic bias. Each of you has witnessed accountability in action. Take it with you. Speak up. Challenge assumptions. Protect dignity wherever you find it compromised. The passengers erupted in quiet applause. Phones continued to capture the moment. Emma whispered to Marcus, "You just changed lives." He smiled faintly. "No, we change lives. Every person who witnesses injustice and decides to act is part of the change. Every story matters." Jessica wiped her tears, finally straightening in her seat. I understand now. I want to make this right." Morrison nodded, understanding the gravity of the lesson. "I'll do whatever it takes to learn from this," he admitted. "My son, I want him to grow up in a world where people like him aren't judged before they're known." Marcus's eyes softened, just a fraction. "Then start here, with your own actions. Today we've turned one flight into a movement. Tomorrow, it's the world." As the plane touched down in Phoenix, passengers disembarked slowly, their minds alive with reflection. Outside news crews waited. Social media exploded. Hashtags trending, videos going viral. The story was no longer just about one man. It was about systemic change, courage, and the power of standing up to injustice. Marcus stepped off the plane last, pausing to look back. 147 passengers, countless online viewers, and a crew forever changed by this experience. The flight was over, but the impact would resonate for years. Every act of bias witnessed, every assumption challenged, and every voice raised mattered. In seat 2A, a black man had not only claimed his rightful place, he had forced a system to reckon with its mistakes. And as the sun set over Phoenix, a quiet truth lingered. Justice isn't given. It's demanded, one courageous act at a time. If Marcus's story inspired you to question assumptions and stand up against injustice, hit like, share this video, and subscribe, because the next person facing unfair treatment could be someone you know. Don't just watch, be the change.